So now, as you might have remember from the previous discussion, so we were looking into the GANs. Okay. Now we looked at uh, till DC GAN, and that is deep convolution GANs. Do you have any questions till that point? Any specific questions till week three that is covered?
No, sir, I don't have any specific question prepared right now.
Hmm.
I just joined that to know like what type of questions will maybe might be asked in the exam, or how should I prepare, or like this sort of like generic things, like what are the things going on, like that.
Actually, just to answer your question and then to proceed, so we don't have any such specific template. Like this is what will be asked. Now, preferably, whatever has been taught during our discussion on similar lines, we'll be asking, and then you can sample it and understand from the graded assignments that are there and the quizzes that are given. Now, almost on similar lines, we'll be giving the questions. Okay.
Okay, so graded assignment questions are like kind of uh, we can expect that kind of questions.
On similar lines, yes.
Okay, okay. And it will be from week 1 to 4, is it?
Week 1 to 4. Why week 1 to 4?
No, quiz one, I'm asking.
Oh, quiz one. Okay, quiz one is from week 1 to 4. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So, any other queries you have? Can I just continue?
Uh, yeah, I don't have any specific query right now,
Hmm.
so I'm not sure like what is the generic setting of the live session and all. I just wanted to see like how
Okay.
we work.
The
Yeah.
idea is so what we intend to do is, if you have got any specific queries, we will answer. I just want to know till what week you have looked into.
Okay. And one thing that for the previous live sessions, is there any YouTube channel, or like where can I get the YouTube link or recording link?
I'm not aware of it.
Oh, okay.
Whatever session has happened, the recording will be there. Last week there was nobody, right, Chandan?
Yes, yes, there was no one. Yeah.
So that of course won't be there. Before that, one session was conducted, right? The recording will be there, Rakesh, in the YouTube channel of the course. Okay.
YouTube
Uh,
channel questions.
uh, Ma'am, do you have any link? Can you share it in the chat?
Yeah, I'll have to check. Let me check.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay.
And sir, do you have any specific plan, like what are you going to discuss today's session?
See, today, so in the previous live session, we have covered till week 3. Okay. I just
Okay,
gave people a bird's overview of what is there till week 3. And today I'm planning to give for week 4. That's the plan.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know if you have looked at the videos of those weeks. Actually, I don't know.
No, I have not seen. I'll watch it after this. That's why I asked the
Yeah,
recording link.
then okay, then it doesn't make any sense now because first you should know the things before going into the overview, right?
Yeah, I have some basic idea. You can go with today's session. So after that, I will watch the previous sessions also.
Okay, I'll just go into whatever plan that I have.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
You can meanwhile. Yeah. So you can mute yourself if you don't have any specific questions.
Yeah, yeah, just
So now, till the previous session, so what we have done is, now we have looked at the deep convolution GAN. See, I have given you the basic idea of training and how do you implement it and how do you look at uh, the equation. Now this is where we have stopped in our earlier discussion. So now the idea is, now all the mm, ways in which we have trained the GANs, okay, let it be in MLP or using DC GAN. Now we have a problem. Now the problem is posterior collapse, okay, or it is also called as mode collapse. Now I have briefly explained now what are the problems now that you face now whenever you have the mode collapse. Okay, so now what we shall do is, to avoid that, there is another formulation of GAN, which is called as a Versus-Stein GAN. I'll just give a brief overview of that. Let me share my screen. Okay, so now we looked at the idea of I'm just going through the same notes. Now this notes is actually the same sir notes. Okay, now we have the problem of manifold hypothesis. The idea is, okay, now the data that you have now may not be spanning the space in which it is present. Now for example, if you take a uh, MNIST data, now MNIST data is in R784. Okay, no, but the number of examples that we have is 60K. Okay, now the idea is, okay, so now any random vector that you take in R784, that may not be a valid image. Now because of which, okay, now we say that the data which is there no doesn't span the whole space. Okay, now it occupies a subspace. Okay, now this is the idea. Now since it occupies a subspace, okay, now there are issues called as mode collapse. Now the idea is uh, very simple. So now the px and p theta are distributions over rd. Okay, now since they lie in lower dimension, lower manifolds. Okay, so now what happens is the support that is there for px and p theta now will not be aligned. So now no, we don't want such a case. So now whenever we have supports that are not aligned, now we always have the problem of saturation. Okay, now the problem of saturation is, no, you will not be able to obtain nice examples. Okay, now why? Now because you obtain something called as a perfect discriminator. Now what do you mean by discriminator, perfect discriminator? Now that means that now given any example, now the discriminator will be able to tell that whether it belongs to the real class or to the fake class. That is the issue. Now we don't want discriminator to do it actually. Now we don't want the discriminator to become perfect. Okay, now at that time what happens is, now the perfect discriminator, now then your discriminator will be independent of the generator parameter. Okay. Now, because of which, now you see that, okay, you see bad reconstructions or bad sampling. Now, how do you avoid this problem? Now, to avoid this problem, now what is the source of the problem? The misalignment, now that is there in the two distributions. Now, you have to somehow come up with a metric that will not pose a problem. Now, when you have when p theta and px are not aligned, that is what we need. Now, as it turns out, now we have a metric called as Versenstein metric that will help us in this specific case. Okay. So now how does this work? Now the idea is pretty much simple. Now you have the mass. Now you have to redistribute the mass. Okay. Now you have a certain mass. I'm taking a discrete case. You have a certain mass, and then you have to redistribute in another format. Now you can do it in multiple ways. Now I want such a move plan. This is also called as a transport plan. I want such a transport plan. Now, using which this distribution, the redistribution which is there, now actually happens with least possible effort. That is the idea. Now, if you remember, during the tutorials of this specific Wasserstein GAN, now I have taken a discrete example and then I have explicitly shown now how do you redistribute. A simple case has been taken and then now we have shown. So we come up with the matrix now which is called as a transport plan. Okay. Now we come up with a plan now which is called as a transport plan. So now then what do you do? Now you want to know how much is the mass that is moved. Okay. Yes. Now mass at a specific point. Now whatever has been moved, now you can get it now via the difference. Okay. Now distance of the movement of the mass. This you can take it. Okay. And then you multiply with the mass, so you get the total work done. Okay. Now this is the distance of the movement. Now this is the mass. Okay. Now this comes from our transport plan, and this is the distance that is there. You multiply it. Now you get the total work done. Okay. Now then what do you do? Now you want the least one, right? Now that means that you should take an expectation, which totally makes sense. Now we want the average work done to be least. Okay, now this is the overall idea. Now you have two distributions. Now you have to redistribute the mass in such a way that, okay, now we are able to make them similar. That is the idea. And then, yeah, what are the criteria that has to be satisfied, the marginalization criteria, all those things, you can look it up. Okay. So now how do you come up with this? Now you have the family of joint distributions that are there. Now from those family, you want the one which corresponds to the least work done. Okay. Now this is the distance that is moved, and then you have taken an expectation with respect to the transport plan that you have, and this is what is called as the Versenstein distance. So any questions with the Versenstein distance? So if you have got any questions, you can stop me then and there. This is the Versenstein metric between two distributions. Now, but one thing it has to satisfy is, now you take any of these transport plan from the family of transport plan. Now all of them now should satisfy this condition. Okay. This is the condition of marginalization. It has to be satisfied. Okay. Now this is the idea. So now, how do you solve it? I'll not go into the details of Kantorovich duality and stuff. Those things you can get it from the theory sessions. So now remember, what is the idea? Now you want the least movement with respect to the transport plan. Huh? Now that is the basic crux that is there in the Versenstein matrix. And then you go ahead with that. And as it turns out, yeah, this is what finally it will become. Now, one important thing that needs to be taken into consideration that so now your outcome now should be it should be having one Lipschitz. Okay, now this condition has to be satisfied, because of which we use gradient clamping the gradient. Now this, why, how do we do it, and other things. Now, yeah, now we have looked into in our tutorial. So now there are multiple ways of seeing that. Okay, now how good. Okay, the matricial divergence is one, and similarly Versenstein matrix is one. As it turns out, now whenever you have your Versenstein metric, the generation of samples now will be much more nice, and then it is stable. But there is a problem that it is not a lower bound. Yeah, all those things I'll not go into it. So any questions on Versenstein GAN? Okay. So now then we have the idea of inversion, the inversion of GAN. Now, if a GAN is well trained, now how do you look at it? Now for from Z, you'll be getting the X. Okay. So now what is the question that we are asking? Now we want such a way that, okay, we are interested in the idea of inversion. Now, what do you mean by inversion? Now, given Z, you're able to get X. But the question is, given X, can I find Z? Now, this is the idea of inversion. Okay. That is, that you have an Xi now belongs to the distribution Px. Now, is there a way in which I can obtain Zi now, which is corresponding to that specific Xi? Okay. Now, why is this important? Yeah, now whenever that is possible, it means that now I know what is the crux of the image. Okay, now it is some kind of an encoded information, which can be used for an idea of feature extraction. Okay, so now with respect to this, now we come up with the idea of bidirectional GAN. Okay, now how do you go ahead with this bidirectional GAN? As the diagram itself suggests that, now you have your G and then you have your encoder E. Okay, so now for this you pass the sample of Z. Now you get X hat. To this you pass the X, and then we get the Z cap. Okay, and this is what you get. So now when do you say that this inversion is correct? Now we say that the inversion is correct now when the discriminator is not able to differentiate between the input and its embedding, generated embedding, okay, and Z and its generated image. Okay, now you have X and its encoding form. Now this is X and your encoding form. Now X is known. Now this is where you have parameters phi, and then G theta, that is your generator. Now you pass the Z to this. Now this pair, the discriminator is not able to distinguish. Now when it is not able to distinguish, what does this mean? Now if you are not able to distinguish between these two pair, that means that from the image space and the latent space, yes, it has been learned properly. Now if you want to do generation, okay, you sample from Z and give it here. If you want the embeddings, now you take the X and get the embeddings. Okay, this is the idea. Now you can see here that X and G theta, now these are in the data space, and then your E phi of X and Z, they are in your latent space. Okay, and then yeah, you modify your loss function accordingly. Yeah, I'll not be going into that. It will be a straightforward modification. Now you should be able to do it. Okay, and in a similar manner, yes, exactly, you have the GAN inversion for latent regression. The idea is exactly similar. Okay, any questions on these things? Any questions, guys? Okay, so now let's look into the idea of domain shift. Okay, so now the idea of a domain shift is, now you have two distributions. Now one is the source distribution, the other is the target distribution. Okay, suppose you have a distribution like DS. Now this is your source distribution. You have XI, YI. Now they belong to PS. Okay, so now, but what happens is, during the testing phase, your data doesn't come from DS, but it comes from DT, another distribution. Okay, now when which DT and DS are different. Okay, now the best example is, now you have images of your training set, but during your testing, you'll get sketches, cartoons, paintings, anything like that. Now, how do you solve this problem? Yeah, this is again reiterating the same data. Now, what is the objective? Now, given DS, now DS has your uh, Y, but DT just has the X. Now, we want to learn features such that I should be able to perform well on both PS and T theta. Okay, that is the idea. And how do you achieve it? Here is that. Okay, now how do we do it? So now you have your phi. Mm, you have your X. Now X will generate Fs, and then X hat will generate Ft. This is from your source distribution, and this is from your target distribution. And then your discriminator should not be able to distinguish between Fs and Ft. Okay, now this is your regular GAN setup actually, almost similar to that. But in addition to that, you have a classifier. Now you give Fs, and then you get Y given X. Now this is your classification. Okay, now for this phi, you give X and X hat, out of which you get Fs and Ft depending on whether you have given X or X hat. and your discriminator should not be able to distinguish between your fs and ft. Now when the training has been done, now what does this mean? Now it means that now the distribution of feature space of your source and the distribution of the feature space of your target has been same. Now that means that irrespective of the kind of data that you have, your features are similar. Okay, this is what we are able to see in this case. Okay, so now yeah, and this is similar to our GAN uh, formulation. Yeah, you just go ahead with the similar way. This is the idea of unsupervised domain adaptation. Okay, UDA. Now then, the last idea that we shall be looking into is, okay, now all these things are fine. Now how do you evaluate the images? Now how good is the image? Now here, now what do we do is, okay, now why I should worry? I take a trained network. Okay, now then what I will do, trained network in the sense, trained on what? Now trained on ImageNet. And then what I will do, I will take some intermediate representation of your generated data as well as your true data. Okay. Now take a pre-trained inception network, so which is trained on ImageNet. Pass your real data and then the generated data both through the ImageNet. You choose some layer. Okay. Now whichever layer you have chosen, now you get the representations of that. Now then what do? You compute the FID score. You compute the FID score, now which means that lower the FID scores, now it means that these distributions, your Px and then the train distribution P theta star are same. Okay. Now it is not mandatory that you should only take the inception network. You can take any other network also, and then you can obtain a similar result. Okay. This is the idea that you will be looking into in the week 4. So, any questions on these? Any other questions? Okay. No questions. I don't know what. No questions is good. So now what we shall do is, now I'll give you a small overview of week 5 in the next live session. Now, if you have got any specific questions on any of the previous topics, you can always get them and then we can discuss them in our live sessions. Okay. Now
Hello.
this, yes.
Are the live share recordings there?
Uh, I think it should be there. Now, logistical question, I think Anamika madam will be the right person to answer them.
I'm not able to find the link actually.
Vikram, did you check? It's not on YouTube.
Uh,
It
no,
was
ma'am.
definitely recorded. It
Hello,
have,
ma'am. So I found on
yes.
the YouTube channel that the past live session is there, the last live session is there, but this live
Mhm.
session is not live or streamed on that channel. Like I cannot find that.
Which one? The one we shared the link.
Today's no today's live session. So the
So
link you
today's
shared,
is
that is
getting today's is getting recorded and streamed as well. You might see it there. Let me check
No,
after
but
this
it is.
call. You don't see it?
Uh, no, I cannot see it on the it as live or streamed. Like the
I,
channel name is DA5002 space one. Is it?
right. Yes.
Yeah, but it is not getting live streamed there.
Okay. Here I see that it's getting streamed. Nitin had streamed it. It's. Let me check after I close this. Let me check in the channel.
Okay, okay, okay.
Anyway,
So
it's getting
if not,
recorded.
if yeah, yeah,
If
if
not,
not, then can you upload it on the channel?
yes, yes, it's getting recorded. So in case, just in case it's not on YouTube, we will get it uploaded.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay. Thanks.
yeah.
Okay.
Shall I close, Chandan?
Yeah. So I think
Okay,
there are no questions, I guess. We can.
okay, sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Thank you. So we will meet next week.